and I was just kind of getting to know the medium, is that there was a lot of I was trying to do too much in a page, because that's the screenwriter in me. It was just
Yep.
trying to do too much, and like learning how to do less was like a big lesson in that process with Mark.
Welcome back to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, a show where we promote indie comic creators and become inspired by what they create and their journey of creating it. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and today on the show, we have Jessica from wickedtreepress joining us, and we talk about balancing creative endeavors from film, prose, and comics, what AI can mean for our future, and why anthologies are an amazing approach for indie creators. All that and so much more on today's Inspired Inc. What got you to move from Michigan to Los Angeles? How did that all take place?
Well, I went to University of Michigan and I went to school for film and screenwriting. So I just came out here. I was always going to come out to California for a little bit because I was born in 29 Palms, but I never lived out here. And then Hollywood, obviously, because the film industry is out here. So I did that first. So I I came out here, I worked at a CAA, and then I worked at for a TV show in the writer's room. And then I did feature film development. And then I got my agent with my screenwriting partner, went out with a bunch of scripts, pitched a lot of movies, made not very much money. And then then I made some films with my husband and then had kids. And then after I had kids, I decided I wanted to write books because that's what I went to school for originally, but got totally distracted by film. And then now I'm kind of doing a hybrid of both. So, which maybe is good for what we're talking. I'm not sure what we're talking about. So I realized I just agreed to come on.
No. That's kind of the way the show goes. And
Okay.
A lot of people who have been on it, it just turns into a really good conversation and it just kind of sprouts. And that's the fun part about it. Like,
Okay.
even that's why I kind of just, everybody who's been on it, like I hit record right away and I'm just like, wherever it goes, we're going to find out information. We're going to have fun. And something is always uncovered behind it.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like what you were just saying, like, you wanted to make books first, then you got drifted into the film industry. Like, how did that distraction kind of come about? I'm really curious about that.
Well, that's college, So basically, I wanted to write like the great American novel. I went to University of Michigan to write, maybe be a journalist, be a lawyer. And then my one friend just kept showing me his screenplays because he was taking screenwriting classes. And I'm like, I liked movies. I never really thought about working in film. And I kept giving him notes on his scripts. And finally I was like, I'm going to take one of these screenwriting classes because I feel like I can write one of these. I maybe thought I could write one better than him. Maybe that's possibly what, yeah. And I was like, hey, if he's writing these screenplays, I can write these screenplays. And so I took a class there and it was an excellent class. And we all had to write a script and I loved it. I just kind of got hooked on it. It was kind of a great combination to me of like poetry and prose, like, cause it was shorter and more, it was just, and it just really vibed with me the way it worked. And then I liked the concept of collaborating, which also then probably brought me to comics. But I just like the idea of writing something and then having other creative people get involved in it and then take it somewhere new. And so I do like that component of filmmaking, which is probably how I got the bug for it and kept writing. So.
And I love that, that analogy there. Just it's kind of like poetry. And I've always felt that even when writing comics, the way you have to just drip in the right captions and drip in the right words and balloons. And also when you're writing your descriptions to, either whoever's gonna be reading the script or your artist, it really is like a love letter. Like you're really trying to make something super clear and vivid. And I don't know how you write your scripts. Do you even write your comic scripts very similar to your film scripts, I would assume?
Well, I do and I don't. Like I will adapt an old script to a comic, which is a little harder for me just because, there is a difference. And if I get too stuck in the way I wrote it as a screenplay, it will not play as a comic because you just show different things visually. And you can only do so much with action and space in a comic that you can do more. You just can do things differently with space. And so I do write them differently. I, strangely enough, used a dark horse format to write scripts when I first tried to do it. And now I've just kind of stuck with that just because that's out of habit. I don't know if that's the best one. I am kind of more So I do kind of follow that script format, which is, just like describing the panels, doing the,
Mhm.
the normal thing. So yeah. Unfortunately, I don't write it like poetry. It doesn't look like poetry, but
No,
I think of
never.
it. I feel like it that I used to like be a bad poet in college. So I like it reminded me of that, just like dropping the right little bit of something to get the point across. So yeah.
And you're like unveiling something a lot when you're telling stories, especially in scripts and in comic book
Hmm.
scripts. So just like poetry, just like slowly peeling back stuff and like, yeah, I get what you mean. It never like actually comes out looking like poetry, but like in your head, the way you're kind of, finding the right beats, especially when you're doing
Yeah.
panel to panel stuff. And even with, film work, I was dabbling when I, just like you, just like in college, I was like, either prose is going to take off, comics are going to take off, or my film stuff is going to take off. And I
Hmm.
really felt like my film stuff was going there for a minute because stuff was about to hit development. And then
Yeah.
my whole life changed. And then all of a sudden, comics just skyrocketed. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'm doing this. Like, it's a really cool thing. But like, when we're talking about like the poetry aspect, it's so interesting because when you're finding beats and even within film scripts and you're trying to find the motion, like every page is supposed to be like a minute long
Hmm.
per on each film
Yeah.
script. And so and in comics you're just like, if I transpose that, it's impossible
Yeah.
because I could have a huge action, like variable movements in one description on a film script, and guess what, that's like a whole half or full page on a comic script. So
Mhm.
therefore it's already been deconstructed in that sense. Like, and when you're talking about visuals being different, what do you incorporate differently visually in a film that you wouldn't do in a comic?
Well, I mean, the things I like to do I'm a big fan of the establishing shot,
Mhm.
both in comics and in film. So I think those translate really well. I think a lot of times, when you're doing a conversation, I mean, action is going to be totally different because you're going to cut in film. You are going to cut, like if you're in a fight sequence or you're in an action sequence, you're going to cut from the most dynamic part of those fights, and show little sections of it. And that's going to be similar in comics, but you're not going to be able to show the complete fight sequence in a comic, whereas in a film, you could do a one shot of a whole fight and that's really exciting. But to try to do that in a comic would be crazy. It just wouldn't translate. I mean, maybe someone's done it, but it just wouldn't, I don't think it would translate well. Like you need to like pick like the right kick, the right
Mhm.
reaction and everything like that. And I feel like at some level I'm still like learning that, not learning it but getting better at it each time I do it, cuz I'll go through a script and be like, oh, this is the old Jessica writing this. Like I have more skills now at comic writing because comics are relatively new only 5 years for me. So it's been a
Mhm.
relatively new endeavor. So I'm still
Yeah.
like honing that.
That's such a good example too. Just like,
Yeah.
yeah, one shot could get a whole fight sequence. When I think of
Yeah.
like the movie They Live and that
Mhm.
ridiculously long, like 3 minute like fist
Yeah.
fight scene, and it's just like it literally is like one or two cameras, and you're like, okay, I get like what they put in the script here and how it plays out. But you're right. If that was in a comic book format, I mean, the most you'd want that to take up is like 2 pages, and
Yeah,
even
because
then's
you're
like, it's extensive, like it's a
yeah.
bit over the top. And if you have a comic that's just nothing but a fight scene or a fist fight, the way that kind of no,
No.
it's
Yeah,
just not
it's
gonna
like a
work.
little flip book. You're like
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great way to do something like that. That's a
Yeah.
brilliant way to show a fight. But yeah, like I couldn't imagine that at all. That's so cool. I'd actually, and when I talk to filmmakers and even some of my filmmaker collaborators, like Kai Brown, she
Mhm.
does film and everything. I think that's the craziest thing when I start editing their scripts is like I really have to go in depth edits and get the red pen out and
Yeah.
go over them because of those movements. I always see filmmakers, and it's a hard thing to do in comics is like
Yeah.
one action, a singular action per panel. And that just gets real difficult. And I always
Yeah.
feel like filmmakers always, you're allowed so much freedom and room to breathe. And then you're just so tightly constrained when you switch over. Were some of these ideas that you worked on, like the whole Mary Shelley thing, I just adore, especially when we talk about poets and poetry and whatnot. That was
Mhm.
when I was in college studying Shelley stuff. That was just remarkable for me. Um,
Mhm.
is that where kind of some of that vibe comes from? Is from your filmmaking aspects, or were these potential films you were trying to get done at that point?
No, the Mary Shelley School for Monsters comic series is very much born out of me, the comics. Like, yeah, it never once wanted to be a book. It never was a film project I had that wasn't successful. it was, or just I wanted to take from screenplay to comic script. It was me trying to figure out like how to combine my love of monsters and my love of Mary Shelley, and also a little bit of my little statements I want to make on like some like who we decide to punish in society, like what women characters from mythology or monsters who have been punished more maybe than necessary. Why do we choose to make them the monster? What is it about that and the politics of that? I want to play with that a little bit, but for me, it was just really thinking about kind of my love of Mary Shelley and that young Mary Shelley who had lost her mother and was trying to connect with her mom through her writing. And and then it was just wanting to kind of jump in that world with kind of a school for monsters because I have kids, and I was like, I want to do this, but I want to do it a little differently than I've seen done. And I wanted it to kind of feel like a school that was like X-Men, where they were going out on missions to help other monsters and bring them back, you know, into the fold. And so, yeah, it came very much out of wanting to make a comic type, like a comic series that could, you know, live a long time. It could wink back to Mary Shelley, but it wasn't, it's its own thing as well. And I could explore the monsters that I always wanted to explore, which, you know, I've got La Llorona and Medusa. And I'm going to have, I guess in the next one, I have, I have a kitsune that we're going to deal with, and just like a lot of female spirits and monsters that and I have male ones as well too. I'm not like equal opportunity, but yeah, I just rambled there a little bit, but
No,
yeah,
that's
I
great.
mean, but this was always a comic. I never wanted to make this. I have written a TV Bible for it, an animation Bible, and a
Mm. I
pilot
could
from
see
it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely created that, but that was secondary. That was, you know, making this first was something that I wanted to do. And it was very important to me after having been a screenwriter for a long time. And especially like with my one writing partner, Kim, well, it's Kim O'Malley now. We almost sold an original animation we were going all the way up at Sony and DreamWorks way back when. And it was like crazy because I'm like, oh my God, we're going to sell an original animation. That's insane. That's very hard to do for people. Especially
Yeah.
back then, if it's not based on a book or it wasn't based on, if it wasn't based on a book with a female lead, it was really hard to do back then.
Oh,
Pretty much
wow.
impossible. Yeah. And they didn't have Brave or Frozen yet. So they just, I'm old. Sorry guys. Yeah. And so basically, you know, that experience for me was very powerful. It's like, oh, almost is a lot in Hollywood, especially in that kind of, when you're talking about an original feature film. And I was like, we almost got there, and we did all this work on this story, and then it becomes this weird thing where you've pitched it to everyone, you've talked about it to everyone. Now what do you do with it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just there. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to do that, but I don't. When I came at this again, I was like, I want to make something that exists that people can read or see and experience. And then if one day it makes it into becoming a film or a television show, awesome. But I didn't want to have that experience anymore of writing things and not having them be a product that a reader could experience. And, you know, and that was kind of what brought me back to my original goals of being a prose writer, writing novels. And then I got into comics because a friend of mine had asked me to come to Comic-Con, and I went. I was like, this is amazing. So I'm interested in this now too. But yeah, so and comics has a similarity to film. It allows you to work with artists and other
Mhm.
creative people and have it not just be you, which I really like. So I'm a big fan of like working with an artist. And with Mary Shelley School for Monsters, I work with Anna Weischek, and with my Pistol series, I work with Mark Mctell. And I like really working with them because you just learn a lot from them as far as the whole experience. Like, and they bring their own personality and storytelling techniques to it, and it's just becomes something else, which is nice. So
Yeah, I mean, it's so much to unpack there. It's really exciting.
I
Like,
just talked a long
no,
time.
it's okay. I love it. I love it so much. Viewers love it too. So it's great.
Okay.
All that type of information is so valuable in so many ways. You know, I heard another creator tell me one time, like, you know, they really don't put anything like to like any of their, they have a million ideas all the time, but
Hmm.
unless they know they're going to make that series, that book, like they really won't even bother writing it or putting it out or really like fleshing it out all the way unless they know it's going to kind of move forward into something. Is that like a stage you've kind of entered at this point where you're like, unless I know I'm going to physically make this as a comic or it's going to become a book, it's pretty much going to sit in the like the floating idea spectrum of your consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So like kind of to just give you an idea of my week, like I worked on a short comic that I'm going to do in an anthology at the beginning of the week, and then on Monday I have to write like my monster of the week because I do monster of the week Substack. So I do this Substack that is kind of like I discuss different monsters kind of from the point of view of Necro, who's the Book of the Dead character from Mary Shelley's School for Monsters.
I love that too. It's such a great reference in there. So fun.
Yeah, it's fun. And so I tell these like I kind of break down a monster or that I like and kind of mostly nonfiction in one, and then I will make up some stuff that Necro's just making up about them because I want to change their story a little bit. And then I will sometimes write an actual short story from that character's point of view or about that character, like a different folk tale, a new folk tale. And so I think a lot of times when I have ideas that I am interested in, but I'm not going to necessarily flesh out entirely, I do explore them in the monster of the week. Because then I can, and because everyone kind of knows I'm doing a rough draft there. I'm not doing, this isn't my final draft of the story. It's like and that is a good place for me to do that. If I get really possessed by an idea, I'm going to write it in whatever form. But if I like, that's the beauty of being like writing in three formats and mediums is that like I worked on one of my pilots this week, and then I wrote on a short piece that I'm hopefully my husband's going to direct and we're going to do independently. And it's like but I do think if I don't have a plan for it, it doesn't get fully fleshed out. But I will write the idea out and keep it on a Word document somewhere so I don't forget about it. But it is much easier to finish if I know I'm going to reach out to this particular artist. We're going to do this project. If I don't have that, it's not as fun to like. I don't write my Magnus Opus anymore. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just. I mean, I am trying to think of my next book. I have one finished that is a draft that I don't know if I want to go into, and I'm deciding if I want to write another prose series or not, or stick. So it's like that. I am trying to figure out what I'm going to spend a lot of time in because that's a different beast. For me, that's a different beast to sit down and write a novel
Oh
because
yeah, I can imagine. That's a whole different just the detail that goes into a novel versus any sort of script. We have, specific details in comic scripts and, film scripts,
Mhm.
we get like a certain amount of details, but like prose is just a different level. It's a different level
Yeah.
of just sensory, just completely. You have really like pouring everything into there. And it very much is like almost like a step by step type of thing, depending on how you
Mhm.
write. Which I mean, with comics, you're jumping, time like jumps between panel to panel that could go from, mere seconds to like years or days or
Yeah.
anything. And like, I don't know, prose is just such a different beast to tackle on no matter what. It's something that I wish I could really climb in back into and like, work on like a novella or like a series
Mhm.
like that because I really had so much fun playing it. And it was just so challenging. Do you feel
Yeah.
like prose really does like kind of prime you for these other mediums though, because of how much gets poured into it?
It it does. I mean, prose is hard because it's like I like it in one way. The one thing that I'm really good at in prose is the action. I'm
Mhm.
really good at and it's because of my screenwriting background. The transitioning in the action and getting a scene going really fast. I'm really good at. And then what I have to remind myself about is like, you have to sit in this moment, Jessica, and you have to really bring the reader here. You can't. It's not a screenplay. It's not a comic. There's going to be no visuals. Like I have to remind myself it's my job a lot of the times
And to, like,
because
just pause the world and the universe and, like,
yeah,
sit in that moment.
we
Yeah.
need to I have to make the reader come here with me. And that's when it's a little harder for me because I'm so used to the other mediums. And so then I have to like retrain my brain. And so I mean it's been a lot easier because I've written a trilogy over the last 5 years. I'm now writing short stories all the time. But at first I was like, just remember you are not writing a screenplay right now. You can't just like cut around and it's a little different. I mean, you can cut around, but yeah. And then I think what helps was from the prose writing to like screenplay writing or to comic writing is you're just so used to like creating a big, like a whole chapter, creating a scene, doing this whole thing. Um, it's really nice because your brain already paints that all out, you know. So
Mhm.
I'm already have a very visual mind because I have to, like, because I need to see it, and so
Mhm.
that does help a lot when you're trying to decide what's important to tell an artist, like what they need to be told and what they don't need to be told, you know, which is I
The
also
hard
learned that.
part.
I also learned that from the artists. You know, they're like what they ignore and what they don't ignore. You know, and
I'm finding how different
yeah,
artists work too
yeah,
with that, and it's always I've had artists tell me to put more detail into things and I've had
hmm,
artists tell me to subtract detail. And so now I found
yeah,
like a very like middleman like way of writing my first script to a new artist and
yeah,
being like, do you need me to add more? Do you need me to subtract more? And then once I get what they need as a creator, that's where I just like kind of let the reins go and be like, I've done what you've asked for and I'll
yeah,
let you just like, push out the rest. And sometimes it's just like mind blowing where I'm just like, you're adding stuff that I would have never thought of or you've really
hmm,
that's a cool thing about collaboration. They can
yeah,
transform your idea into something that is just beyond what your imagination could even start to think of.
yeah,
But with prose, you really are just like a solitary act for the most part, just trying to
hmm,
envision that. And I mean, like whenever I do any sort of script writing, it's literally a movie playing in my head over and over. I play the scene in like just
yeah,
on repeat until I could visually like clearly see it and then I could actually transcribe it and detail it. Kind of like talking about something you have no idea about, where it's just
yeah,
like you're like, I could get through this, but it won't be as good as if I would have actually done like the full homework. And it's like
hmm,
that's the way writing kind of works. Like you got to do the homework in your head to like be able to get it out of your system and actually be clear and concise. Cause I feel a lot of writers, and you've probably encountered this yourself, like they put out so much onto the page, but then you're kind of realizing like, oh, this is the way you understood it, but you're not putting it in a way for like anybody else, like an artist or a collaborator, to fully understand your vision.
hmm,
And that's where
yeah.
writers seem to get frustrated and stuck. So how do you work through like those balances between how much info you put into each section, and also like how do you know what story is going to be best for which medium?
Well, I guess for the first part with working with artists, you know, that's it's sometimes like I'm still kind of new to it, but like I'll look at their style and see how they interpret a page or a story, and it kind of gives me an idea of how they work. But really, like one of my kind of methods with artists is I try to do a short project with them first.
Mhm.
Um, with a so where we do a character design and we just do a short script, whether it's for an anthology or something else, so that I can get that idea, right? And
Yeah.
see how much like with Anna, um, we did a short together and I sent her the character descriptions and the whole idea of the world. And then we did a short based in the Mary Shelley world for Cthulhu's Hard to Spell anthology.
Oh, cool.
And that was the first time that those characters show up. People don't really know that, but that is the first time they show up because Anna, I wanted to work with her. I'd worked with her. I had been in an anthology her art was in, and I saw her art and I was like, oh, I really dig the way she did fire. And that's all that started. That's how that started. I was like, oh, I like her fire. I'm gonna email her and see if she wants to do this. I think she'd make a cool. There was some fire in mine. I was like, that'd be cool. And for some reason, I just thought I just in my mind, I was like, could be really good for this project I'm obsessed with right now, which was Mary Shelley. And we did it. And it with her, I do a more bare. I'm not like crazy detailed, but if I do put the detail in, like very specifically, I'm probably really passionate about the detail,
Yeah.
because like, yeah, I mean, I give enough, and I usually will send like, cause we do a lot of period stuff and, because there's the back in time and there's certain
Mhm.
things. I send pictures of things if I have a real specific viewpoint on how something looks, so I will send visual references, which I think is a really good, helpful tool. You could put them within your script if you want. I know some artists, some writers do. They just put the visual references right into their
Yeah.
scripts. I usually will just attach them and be like, this is what I'm thinking about for this room. This is like the vibe of the outfit. This is, if it's really important to me. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, I, what I learned a lot with Mark when I did Pistol, because Pistol was my first comic, and I was just kind of getting to know the medium, is that there was a lot of I was trying to do too much in a page. because that's the screenwriter in me. It was just
Yep.
trying to do too much, and like learning how to do less was like a big lesson in that process with Mark. Um, but yeah, a lot of it is looking at what they've already done and figuring out what one of my projects or stories would connect with them, because I'm in the process of doing that for two different stories right now. So I have like lists of artists that I'm looking at, guys. So I'm eventually going to email people. But yeah, like trying to figure out, is that style going to fit the story? So
Hmm.
because what I don't want to do is pick an artist and go, oh, this is not doesn't match anything they've done. And now I'm
Yeah.
going to ask them to do something totally out of their wheelhouse. And then I'm going to be frustrated when they send me back their style. Like that's
Hmm.
important. Like you're if you have a visual like reference of a way, like I'm doing a horror piece right now involving Krampus, and I do have a very specific way I want Krampus to look, right?
Hmm.
So I have to look at the artist and decide if I think that they are going to be able to draw that Krampus, because I don't want to like force it.
Yeah, you want it
Yeah.
to be very organic and
Yeah.
natural when you're working with them, and I love that because that's so crazy. It's actually really reinforcing for how I operate too, because I
Yeah.
always thought the same mindset. I was like, you know what, anyone I work with, I should do a short story with. You get a vibe, you get a feeling if you want to move forward to a bigger series. I would hate to start like, let's do the 6 issue thing or this 4 issue
Hmm.
thing, and then you're just like, oh, issue one was like kind of rough working with him and I got to do this
Yeah.
whole thing and I'm just not satisfied. And it's probably nothing against him. It's just chemistry. It's just how
Yeah.
things balance out and what you're looking for as a creator and what they're doing as a creator. And
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't mesh up, but like doing those short little sprints, like it elevates you a lot better and it really gets you to understand each other and you could kind of
Hmm.
edit things out and any like early frustrations or misunderstandings are kind of wiped away almost immediately.
Yeah.
And then if it is someone that you're going to work well with, it just clicks.
Yeah.
We did the punk anthology up here, and that's
Okay.
where I had our friend Nicholas do the cover, and we did Teenage Babylon, the first Teenage Babylon story in there. And
Okay.
then Nicholas like had an injury, and I was like, you know what, it's kind of good that he just did that short story because he had to bow out from the book. And then I found Christian,
Hmm.
and we did this ash can together, and it just was the coolest thing we've ever put together. And now we're super excited to launch the whole series together. But like
Nice.
it took that little intro moment to kind of just like solidify stuff. And if you
Yeah.
jump into projects too wildly, too big, the bigger chance it is to fall apart right away.
Hmm.
And not that that's not like, possible even with a more solidified artist, but like the bridge is a lot weaker.
Yeah.
Your everything about that partnership is a lot weaker. So I love being able to establish that in a shorter anthology. And that's kind of why Apollo, all three of these that we put out were just 3 anthologies. That was our first releases, just
Hmm.
three, kind of giving the branding for our voice, punk rock,
Yeah.
sci-fi, and just like a passionate viewpoint of something for the Shadow Anthology. And so like that just gave a lot of creators, we found out, room to breathe and also discover other creators. Other
Yeah.
people are walking away from these anthology projects doing books together. Kai Brown, who did the Shadow Anthology, has like four
Yeah.
creators working on her movie that she's putting out.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, so it's really cool like hearing that your story has been extremely similar in that sense and how
Hmm.
beneficial anthologies are overall.
I think that is the number one reason anthologies are important. Is it not only gives like readers a chance to be introduced to new artists, it gives young artists a chance to like get something published,
Yeah.
and get seen. But it also just, I mean, you don't get paid very much usually for an anthology, or they're
Oh.
not. But it's like gives you a chance to, work with a new partner. Um, See other people's art that you wouldn't have seen. I mean, I noticed that when I work in an anthology. I'm like, oh, I there's so many artists out there, and I don't have the time to read and see every single artist. And so anthologies, especially with indie artists, help a lot,
Mhm.
because you'll just be flipping through. And usually with an anthology, a lot of times, like I only really love a couple of them in any anthology, even really good anthologies. There's usually just a couple that I'm really drawn to. And then you're like, make note of those names, and you're like, all right, maybe I'll work with them someday. There's just too
Yeah.
many, there's not enough time for all these projects though.
I
Yeah,
feel you. I feel you on that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
once you get started, especially in comics, and you start really solidifying yourself and making a name and
Mhm.
realizing how capable things are, it just seems to like overload, and then you're just like
Yeah.
drowning in work. Where you're just, maybe the money might not be there, but the work is definitely
The work
there.
is there.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's that's kind of the fun part. Is like that's when it divides like. am I doing this for, money? Am I doing this to like make a living off of? Or am I
Mhm.
doing this because I'm passionate about this craft and
Yeah.
what I want to do? And sometimes you just need to build up your body of work a little bit to like actually have it pay off years later.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that has been like an after effect of you as well from working in film and doing all these things and then entering comics? Did that kind of help they help you establish yourself as a creator in comics?
Um, Filmmaking, I
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide if like filmmaking itself helped me establish myself in comics because I I'm not sure. I feel like it maybe helped me understand the medium a little bit, but
Mhm.
I do feel like just um I guess like my understanding of how like a collaborative process works, a collaborative thing works. Yes. I did have a few people that I knew from film that also do comics. There are a lot of filmmakers doing comics. I mean, that
Mhm.
is very on trend right now. I will say, like, I think there's a lot of frustrated screenwriters making comics. We are a breed of comic creators, that is for sure.
Is that because
And
like filmmaking just gets difficult to get like pushed through and green lit and
yeah,
created and comics are more capable?
yeah, I think so. And they're faster and they're cheaper. And we all like them. We love, I mean, I think for the most part, like screenwriters like a visual medium. So we're going to like comics. And it, and what we learn, when you get kind of burnt out or frustrated with screenwriting, it is a very nice place to come. Not that it's easier because it's not. It's just cheaper, and
Mhm.
so not if you want to make something. And I don't suggest if you have a film that you want to make to go make it into a comic because that might not satisfy you. But like if you're frustrated and want to try a new medium and actually love comics, then you should do it. I don't think if you don't love comics that you should give that a try. Like you
Yeah,
have
it's
to
not
love,
like your
yeah,
give up
yeah.
option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, 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 no. I don't think of it like that at all. I just think that it's is just as engaging and exciting as of a medium. And if you're into it, then it's going to appeal to you if you're a screenwriter because it's visual and you get to work
Mhm.
with artists and other people. And so that is appealing because that's kind of your training in your head. Um, but no, I don't think just any screenwriter should try to make a comic. But I do think there is quite a handful of them. So I do think those connections have been helpful. But for the most part, I think it was just a lot of the indie creator scenes that I got to know through anthologies. I would say anthologies are really helpful. And people have just been like, once they get to know you and they know you're going to stick around, they're pretty supportive. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's super
Yeah.
cool. And it's kind of enlightening too to kind of like not give up hope on what you're working on. Like if you
Hmm.
have a passionate project you're doing, like see it through, even if it's a film or music project or whatever. But
Yeah.
like know that if you have to like I think of Coheed and Cambria. I mean, they were a band and he had a story to tell.
Yeah.
And essentially, like he was like, you know what, I can't fully tell the story just through the music, and he felt like comics was like the best way to tell the story, so they started making
Yeah.
comics out of it. And it's like, yeah, like have something to balance out stuff like that, but like always
Yeah.
keep your eye on like what you truly want.
Hmm.
So out of like the three, and you're in like very similar position of me in the sense of like film, prose, and screenwriting, like which one do you feel like you actually have more passion for and more love that you could really just engulf yourself in completely? It's a hard
That
choice because you're
that
busy in all of them.
that's really hard because I love to watch movies. I love TV. I love reading books. I love reading comics. Like I love all of those places and I get something different out of every single one of those things just as a consumer of them. But I think being like a reader and a viewer is what brings you to these places because you love reading, you first love reading comics, you first love watching movies, and then you're like, oh, maybe I can create those things. And I don't know. I mean, that's a really hard. I don't know if I can choose between the three. I
Kind of like
do.
choosing your favorite kid between how many projects you have
Yes.
created and whatnot, like it's not like you're just barely dipping into any of them at this point too. So I know it can be
No, and
super hard.
I would say the story, since being a writer is not just being in a room writing something, it is also engaging with your audience. I would probably say in the next couple of years, what will get my attention most is what the readers or my audience is engaging with the most,
Mhm.
because telling a story is great, but the more people that are actually engaging with the story and loving the story is what really drives the continuation of that. And so I do think that would be a big part of my determination. It's like right now I'm really enjoying Mary Shelley's School for
Yeah.
Monsters. So I am very passionate about that project. So I'm putting a ton of energy into it. Because it's being well received, I'm getting a lot out of doing it. Anna's getting a lot out of doing it. So it's just a really enjoyable like experience, and it's not completely falling flat on its face financially, so that's good too. Right. And then like, but I mean, film's always been a big love of mine, so I'm sure if I ever got the opportunity to do that, I would give that a shot as well. So I just don't think I could give any of them up. I
Yeah.
obviously I couldn't. It's like I can't cut one of my babies in half. I'm sorry, Brandon. I don't know.
And
I
then
don't know which one it would be.
are you in such like a good, I mean, it sounds like it too. It sounds like you have such a good writing routine and it's so like
Mhm.
instilled into you. It seems like even if you did have one of these pop off and go crazy where you're
Mhm.
just like have a big film deal and that's what your focus, it sounds like you would still carve out time to be like, well, I got to write my comic in my downtime or I got to work on the
Yeah.
like the novel for now. It doesn't seem like any of it is like the type of work that you're avoiding. It all seems like
No.
work where you're like, oh, if I'm not really in, buried in this project, I'm still going to find room to do this because I need to get this out. Like, is that
Yeah.
essentially what your day to day and your groove is like, your mental?
Yeah, because I'm not a good like all or nothing project person. Like I can't it's very rare that I spend a week just writing one thing because
Hmm.
mentally I can't do that. I'm very bad at I can do it when I have a big deadline, but I don't like doing it. So my preference is to like Monday I like to work on my short stories, and then like Tuesday I like to work on one specific project and just intensely work on it. And then, well, today's been weird, but yeah, I mean, I did write a short story this morning, but and then I'm talking to you. I mean, I'm also a mom, so like that
Yeah.
plays into it as well. But yeah, yeah, I can't imagine a world where I would not do comics anymore. It's become kind of part of my DNA. However, I'm not one of those comic creators. I resist this very much. I am just not one of those comic creators who's like, I have to make like this many books a year, or like I don't have meaning in my life. But that's financially, I understand that. But like, I just can't produce things that like, I mean, I guess I could if I was just didn't have. I can't produce like that. Like, it's just not my nature to like be able to churn out like 10 books a year. I just can't do that. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
and that's fine. But it's fine if you can. I'm excited for you. I just can't do it.
Oh, totally understandable. And I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
sounds like, everything else you do with like Wicked Tree Press keeps you really busy no matter what. Like you're
yeah.
balancing a publishing aspect of it in general too. And I know that's just a lot of work because you're also doing all the background work and people forget about like,
Ugh,
you're not
background.
just writing comics and like having that fun and just like getting them in the mail. Like, I don't know how much work you do on the design and things like that, but just like operating it in
Hmm.
general, going to conventions and things like that,
Yeah.
time consuming, draining, figuring stuff out, setting up your table, interacting with people, following up,
Yes.
podcasts, interviews. Like there's a lot that comes with it.
It's hard. I mean, I just this year I'm working more closely with Metal Ninja Studios to do the design. I work pretty. I mean, I when I do the design with them, I am very involved. Like I
Mhm.
have it all scripted out. I have images that I send them. But they work really hard on like we talk over pages and the back matter, and they do it. And so it's nice to have that because it gets lonely doing a lot of it all by yourself, and they're a really good team. And then Blake Morgan has been helping me with publicity and social media, which is good because I really hate social media and I wish I could not be on social media.
I feel you.
I don't hate the internet, don't get me wrong. And I didn't
Right.
used to hate social media. But what I find about social media right now is that no matter what I do on it, it just seems like my engagement is weird now. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I go,
Yeah.
it's not like I don't see the people I want to see. They don't see me. I feel like there's no real, I'm sure someone has the answer because, everybody, there's all these people who have the answer for a certain amount of money. But but it's just, I feel like the more effort I put into some of it, the less well it does. And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm
I feel
like,
you there.
where Substack, I'm having a lot, I love Substack. Despite all of its drama over the last couple of years, I really enjoy that community. I enjoy that and doing my newsletter over there, doing writing over there. But yeah, So that I agree with you. All that other stuff, I'm like, I would love to take on, like, my goal in the next couple of years. I just went to a publishing conference and I would love to like take on other projects that weren't solely connected to me as a
Mhm.
writer. And that is a part of my growth plan. But it's also like to do that is like it it's such a big step. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
so, and so I'm hoping I have an anthology plan. I do want to do one. It's just I've been trying to think of when's the best. I have like 4 projects I want to get started, and I'm like in this moment of like, when do I do this? Because when you're talking about, it's like the shows you gotta, I got, it's like it's I gotta go to ALA in the end of June. I'm going to San Diego in July.
Oh,
I have
cool.
to fulfill a Kickstarter. I'm gonna have another Kickstarter. So it just starts to like, there's only so many hours in the day. There's
Yeah.
only so,
Yeah, and I'm
and
sure, I mean, you might be like me, but, like, I get guilty whenever I put on a movie or something, and I'm like, "I could be packing something or working on something while I watch this, but I just should just watch the movie and just
just watch the
relax for a
movie.
minute." Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we were watching Dune Part 2 last night, and it was, like, an hour into it, and I was like, "I could have been doing fulfillment this entire time. I have everything out." And I'm like, "But my body literally can't move right now." Like,
You cannot fulfill a Kickstarter while you're watching Dune 2.
I know, yeah.
There's too much is happening.
There was, yeah, and that's
Unless
why I
it's
was
your
just stuck.
second time watching Dune 2, then you can do a Kickstarter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's where I need to get to the point where I'm just like, I need to just relax. Like it's so hard, but like everything is just overwhelming. Everything you just said, I am going through myself. I have,
Yeah.
I'm producing 3 shows right now. We have Inspired Ink, we have Spilled Ink, and then we're going to be unveiling a new show. I guess I'll just say it, Understanding Ink, which we're going to be
Oh,
doing
wow.
educational stuff. And
Oh,
then
cool.
we're like, doing the publishing stuff of Apollo in the background. And we're about to hit our 1 year anniversary. So I'm planning that, and
Oh,
then
cool.
everything else with the day job at CWS. And I'm just like, how do I do any of this? Like,
You're fine. You're doing a lot of things. That's like I feel
and
like
the Substack is like you just said it, and I was like, that's on my to-do list. It's been there for 6 months
okay.
now. I've been trying to start that.
Substack has taken up a lot of my time. I love you, Substack, but what I decided to stop doing my normal newsletter, I was just like over just the regular newsletter, and I said I'm going to just move it all over slowly to Substack, um, which has been good and bad. I can't decide if it like to eliminate my newsletter entirely and just make it come from Substack was a choice, but the and I really get something out of it, but the pressure of like having content every Monday
Yeah.
that is not necessarily content. Like I am doing research for a book with this content. I will eventually put some of these stories together. I don't know exactly what it's going to turn into. However, it's still content. And now you have people reading it and you're like, all right, I can't not show up and do the content. Some of these people are paying. So like,
Yeah.
and, and it's fun and it's rewarding, but it is a big addition to your unless you're already doing that something similar on another platform. It
We were
is
kind of doing a Patreon, and that's even
okay. So
like,
that's yeah.
upkeep. And then you're like, well, do I upkeep the Patreon or do I just do everything on Substack, or
Or do
Patreon has
some
its
people do both,
bonuses?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you're just like, how many links am I redirecting people to at this point? You know what I mean? And it's just that Linktree list just keeps on growing.
I have
And you're
this
like,
like fantasy of just having Substack and my
same,
website. I'm like,
same.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, and just cut the social media, just cut all
Yeah.
of it. All I want is those 2. And I mean, even here, I run 3 social medias. I run the Apollo
Yeah.
social media, and then I do Comics Wellspring social media, and then I have my
Mhm.
personal one, which was intentionally just to meet, like, or talk to
Yeah.
family and friends, so it's not all comic book based. But now I'm using that to connect with all family and friends to talk about my comic books. So it's the
Yeah.
same stuff over and over, and
Mhm.
it does fry you out so hard. I don't
Yeah.
know how some people do it. I wish we had a team of 20 to operate and just they all work on one day of the week.
I feel like a ton of us just would, we all need to get together and say, all right, do we, I don't know what we're going to do, but we got to do something about social media.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There
Well,
needs
it's
to be a social media revolution going
like we
on at
all
some
have to
point.
come to terms with how much we're getting out of it and how much we're not getting out of it. But, and we'll see, it's going to transform a lot. Is transforming a lot. So,
Mhm.
I don't know, not to jump into AI, but I mean, I don't really know, like even with Facebook and Instagram, and you've got this little meta guy talking
Yeah,
to you, meta AI out of nowhere. And I'm like, how is that different than the old search? It just used to say search.
yeah.
Now it's like, can our AI help you with anything? And I'm like, I don't know. How is this different? Like, what is it? Isn't it just still the search engine? Like that, it just
It,
makes me laugh.
that's all I use it for essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just old and I just don't know how to like utilize it right, but I
That's what
still
I'm
use it just
wondering.
as a search engine no
Yeah.
matter what. Like
Cause I'm like,
I
what
find
can this
people
do?
tags.
Well, when it first popped up, I'm like, can it do something different than what it did yesterday? Like it doesn't say that, it just says, how can
Mhm.
our AI help you? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if it
You
can.
just run it all for me. That's how AI can help. And I mean, that's one of the things like
That's
AI,
true.
it's such a big controversy between so many creators of like even just using it for minimal tasks, And I
Yeah,
always
like,
feel like AI is like more of like to me, it's like a guitarist and then
yeah,
they plug in a guitar and they're using a distortion pedal or a phaser pedal or
yeah.
something like that. And it's just like, oh, you're using it as a pedal, like a tool. You're not
Mhm.
using it to create everything, but you're using it to enhance something that
Yeah,
you are creating. And I
yeah.
had a team message us about an anthology submission being like, hey, I know you're posting all the anti AI stuff. I just want you to let you know we did use some AI tool to help with the coloring. And I looked at their submission and I looked at like the coloring on that page and what it
Yeah.
was this crazy blast thing. And I was like, oh, you guys are using it as like a tool. Like it's
Mhm.
enhancing it. It's not creating it. It's
Yeah.
enhancing. You're using it to manipulate. I get that. I think that's cool.
Okay.
I think it's you don't utilize it in a sense. If you have to write copy every single day and you're posting 20, as a social media manager, posting 20 blurbs a day, like you're gonna
Yeah.
fry out after blurb number 3, in all
Yeah.
honesty. And so using it to like reword some stuff and like reconstruct, I don't mind using it as a tool.
Mhm.
But like overall, like crutch or fallback or like I always think about it like when I was a musician, if my pedal board isn't working, can I still play this song without all my fancy pedals and sound effects? I
Yeah.
should be able to. And if not, then this song probably isn't that great if I need every single one of these to make it real.
Well, yeah, I
So,
think if it can't be art, I mean, I am still formulating my opinions about AI. I have some very strong opinions in some areas and then some very unformed opinions in other areas. Um, but yeah, if it can't be art or it can't be a story before the AI,
right.
then there's probably a problem.
Mhm.
However, it's so new. I don't know what it'll be in 5 years. I do think, we're kind of talking because I'm the film industry, obviously. I am very much part of the film industry. My husband is a director. All my friends are work in film. And we just went through that huge strike, the writer's strike. And it is very much all these strikes and all the disruption, besides just greed and corporate greed in general,
Mhm.
which
Yeah,
is
no,
really,
honestly.
it's actually our problem
Yeah.
more than AI. But is that there's so many conversations about AI, and when visual effects came on the scene, like when with Abyss and Jurassic Park and I'm sorry, Terminator. Don't forget
Mhm.
Terminator. Um, everyone lost their minds because they were like, this. There'll be no more filmmakers. This is gonna be everything. Now there were jobs that were lost, and like I would say there's probably not as many puppeteers or like
Mhm.
people making, there definitely were jobs that became less, and and didn't have as much need for them. But I mean, and they made a lot of bad effects movies, like a lot of versions of things we never needed that was just
Yep.
visual
Yeah.
effects. So
100%. Yeah.
we got a bunch of garbage. And then I would say that there's some action sequences to this day in movies where I'm just like, this is not enhancing this movie. I know you think it is, but we're just all of our brains shut off at some point because
Yeah.
there's no practical effect in there, and our brains can sense the falseness of it.
Mhm.
And there's a point when you're watching a scene and you know when it happens, when your mind, I mean, I watch everything. When at some point you're watching Avengers and you just like I
You're just
love
like,
Avengers,
where do we
guys. Don't
go?
get all mad. But like at some point, my brain just shuts off, and I'm like, all right, look, when this fight scene's over, let me know because I don't care anymore. Like there
Well,
is a moment when you just don't care
perfect
anymore.
example, Dune 2. I was watching it last night. And
Yeah.
when Austin Butler is like walking into the giant stadium to start doing
Mhm.
all those like self fights, right when he entered the stadium, I was just like, man, we were just in like these catacombs where it was all deserty and
Yeah.
very real life and it was all on set and everything. And then
Yeah.
you show the stadium and I'm just like, I just got pulled out. I like
Yeah.
just
You
can
can
see
you can
how
feel it.
fake it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have
Mhm.
to, and luckily he does a phenomenal acting
Yeah.
job, pulls you back
Yeah.
in. But like,
Yeah.
yes,
Hands down.
it
Yeah.
does. But it does for sure. It's like there's these moments where you're like, get out of there. And I think that's what will probably happen. I do think AI will. there will be jobs that completely disappear because of AI. And
Hmm.
that's just sad. And I don't know how to uh, I don't, because of how money driven everybody is in capitalism, like, and how like it's all bottom line, it's increasing to your shareholders every year. I don't
Hmm.
know how we that is just where you have your unions and you do your best to protect your workers. um AI itself is an interesting, I don't know, I don't know the answer. I don't think society is going to crumble necessarily, but I do
Right.
think it's going to be entirely transformed. And it's weird as a parent right now because, it used to be like, got to teach your kid to code. They got to learn how to code. Well, now the people are saying no one is ever going to, you're not going to need to know how to code because you're just going to have to be able to tell an AI thing what you want coded. And I'm like, that seems like a recipe for disaster, but all right.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so then you're like, well, what side skill am I supposed to be teaching my kid for this new world? And honestly, I think we're in a point where we don't know anymore. We don't know
Yeah.
what that is. So I'm like, well, we got to teach them how to communicate, how to make music, how to
Hmm.
tell stories. I think those things are all still important. I'm just find it curious that we want to farm it out, farm out the fun, the thing that is exciting about life. And I think the only reason we want to farm it out is because we want to make it a commodity. You
Hmm.
know, it's the, we're afraid of AI because everything is made into a commodity in this country. So I don't know. Like if it was just we were all just making art because we loved telling, no one would be trying to get AI to make art.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they see the profit
Yeah,
value behind the art and they're just like, "Oh, I'm gonna that's what we gotta make more of."
yeah,
And so that way we could do other stuff, which is I mean, everyone says it, we get the Ray Bradbury future where we thought, it'd be
yeah,
making us our breakfast and it would do
yeah,
this and X, Y, and Z would clean up the dog poop and all that type of stuff. And you're like, "Oh, it's doing all the fun stuff. Like
yeah.
it's doing all the stuff we want to do." Like, well, that's not right.
No, it doesn't
I
make sense. Yeah,
I feel you on that. It's one of the things where it's just like it's going to be real interesting to see where it is in 5 years,
yeah,
like you said, in 3 years. How we land, and I mean, I know it's been corrupted in some ways, but so is everything. No matter what, there's a bad side to filmmaking, to comics, to music. There's always something in there, like
yeah.
bad egg, that has to make it a little bit more twisted. But
Well,
teaching kids the essentials, the vitals, the
yeah,
arts, you're never going to go wrong with that. I feel like,
yeah,
storytelling is, it's been there since the beginning of time. It's still the most practical tool. Creating art's been there since the beginning of time. It's still the most
yeah,
practical tool. It always comes back down to the basics and fundamentals of like music, art, and literature.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you can express yourself
Hmm.
successfully in any job, you're going to do better,
Hmm.
and if you can express yourself visually, even more so, and like through music, obviously, you can really touch a lot of people. But yeah, it's a kind of a wild world. I mean, it's you would think we would use AI to like clean up the planet, solve our problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we need help with solving, and maybe that will get used that way and it will be great. Like,
We could hope.
when you think about it being used for scientific research, it's possible it could,
Hmm.
advance us to a place where we need it to be, for to battle some of these issues that are so big
Yeah.
right now. But yeah, I mean, it's also possible it's learning from us, which is scary.
Yeah.
And because if you think of it learning from the internet, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
It's different when it's learning in a closed, safe vacuum. But when we put it out in the wild and say, learn from everything out there, we see how well that goes. There's just
Well,
it's a lot of
as
inaccuracies when you do a,
Oh, even that. I didn't even consider the inaccuracy part of like that
yeah,
1984 world that we kind of, anything could be edited and manipulated and like
yeah.
changed, at a moment's notice and backdated. So we all thought that that's what the original article said.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, you're completely right on that. There's so much of just like, it's just so much unknown. And that's
Well,
what's
there's,
scary,
yeah.
And it's like, how is it going to interpret these things that it's being learned? And how is it going to like use that information? And what will it do with it at that point if it can code, if it can do X,
Hmm.
Y, and Z? And we also taught it A, B, and C. Like, what are the possibilities we're unlocking here? What
Yeah.
potential are we unlocking? And what behaviors is it going to go on at that point? I
Yeah.
guess the behavioral aspect of how it's going to take information and then act upon it is like the
Yeah.
mysterious part because we really don't know what it would do.
Well, I always think of it this way, like we since we do comics, you've got the always got the villain, or the
Hmm.
the character, and usually the villain thinks they're not the villain. They're doing something that the world needs them to do that's
Right.
good for the world. And the one good thing that we have had going for a long time with villains is it takes them a while to accomplish these goals. They have an idea and they have to do all these steps to like become the mega villain or whatever. And then with AI, I just wonder like as things happen more rapidly and rapidly, and if you have a villainous character or a character who thinks they are fixing the world or helping the world, and then they have an AI that can do things super fast, very
Hmm.
quickly, then there's no time to like there's not enough time to stop that person,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that's it's hard enough to stop the it's hard enough to stop someone who thinks they're doing the right thing or knows what's best for you, or you just watch Putin right now, you watch any of these leaders like trying to fix things with violence, and there's you can't hardly stop them, so what are you going to do with like
Yeah. And the bigger scheme of things, and
yeah,
it comes back to like what was like the Watchmen thing, the
yeah,
answer, like we need a big disaster to unify us all, but like that's so scary. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like that's terrifying that we have to hit that level of understanding to get progress done. And it's a
Well,
shame that we just can't see it before that, you know?
yeah, we just need that World War II to get us all back on the same page, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. It's
yeah.
yeah, it's
I mean, that's what's scary because it does feel sometimes. You can't get me going because I'm a sci-fi brain, and that's just
I know.
everything I've read.
Everything was just firing right now. Like,
Everything I read just goes right to da, da, da. But yeah, no, I was writing solar punk this morning, which I find very hard to write because
oh, cool.
you have to write like this is going to work out, and I'm like okay.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
you're like,
taking
how?
how yeah. So I'm just like taking an idea that's happening in science right now that I think is definitely not going to work out, and I'm trying to write it that it does work out, and it's been a very fun opposite exercise for me because I don't write like that normally.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I guess that's the fun thing about writing and having that ability too,
yeah,
is that you could take any of these scenarios and you could really evaluate it on your own, and you could really
yeah,
put these thoughts into action and put it, apply it to some characters and kind of just like, roll the dice and see like
yeah,
what direction can this go in my head, and flesh it out and give the world an example of what can happen.
exactly.
I think that's what's great about storytelling is I've always said that storytelling is like survival information. All storytelling is survival information. You're passing on something
Yeah,
that you feel, think, or have experienced to someone else so they could take in that information and know how to handle that situation when they come across it.
yeah,
So utilizing it like that, sci-fi writers, honestly, the greatest amount of survival information we've ever had, because when you go from even Orwell's Animal Farm to
yeah,
84 to everything, it all like really does apply. Foundation trilogy, all that stuff, that's
yeah,
all. Watching Dune, so much of it, my girlfriend just fell in love with like every one of the characters because like what
yeah,
it does, like when they're even talking about like how I guess like all like the past generations go into the Bene Gesserit, and
yeah.
they're like, is it fatal? And she's like, just to men. And she was just like, this is the greatest movie ever. Like
It's just a
this is
man.
like I thought it was brilliant. But it's the truth, you know what I mean? Like so many sci-fi things have truth in them. And I think it's
Hmm.
our responsibility as those creators to really like grasp those truths and hand it to the audience and be like, think about this for a moment. Like
Yeah,
let's just think for a moment and check this out. And I think that's what we do with stories. I mean,
yeah,
Mary Shelley's, hopefully that introduces people to a lot of, great, poetic literature and Victorian literature, because that's what I
hmm.
really got into. And I wish we could have dived
I
way
know we
more
didn't
into
even get
that.
into
I know
it.
it's there's so much I wanted to ask about, like, how you're creating female characters, what it, you were just saying how this, a lot of the stuff you're pitching was before Frozen and Brave and all that. And I think, but that'll probably be a discussion for another episode. But I'd love
Yeah.
to dive into all those things with you as we wrap up this last hour. But
Okay.
gosh, there's so much cool stuff that you're up to with Wicked Tree Press. And I'm so impressed with like how you're handling it, how you're balancing things, what you're doing overall. Before we sign off, like, is there anything that you want to talk about, like with what you're doing this year, what we could look forward to, or where to find your work?
For sure. Well, we talked a little bit about Mary Shelley's School for Monsters. We did just wrap up the Kickstarter for the next chapter from the Origins 2, which is going to be introducing our characters for the Killing Stone, which will be the next hardcover in the series. And in that book, we are going to explore Tamamo no Mei, who is the nine-tailed fox from Japanese mythology, and the Killing Stone, which is a cursed rock in Japan. And basically, we're going to deal with themes of revenge, unforgivable acts, forgiving, letting go of grudges. So we may have a grudge spirit. That is one of our new characters. And basically overcoming those things and facing those things from your past. So the crew from the School Monsters is going to have to face an old ally slash enemy, a frenemy, which is the nine-tailed fox, and kind of make up for what they did to her and see if they can get forgiven. And then Mary Shelley, or Shell, our supernatural character, is going to have to let go of a grudge she has been holding since the day she got captured by Dr. M and got disconnected from her physical body. So it's all going to be about forgiving and grudges, and it's a wild adventure. We're having a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll have that. That's going to come. The hardcover's coming to Kickstarter in October. Hopefully we will have it. I think my plan is to have it published in April
Cool.
2025. Right now, people can go to we did finish the Kickstarter, but you can go to wickedtreepress.com, or you can go find the project on Kickstarter and link to the pre-order page, and you can still get that comic for the next week. And then I'm going to lock it down because I'm going to send everything out. So you can find me at wickedtreepress.com. You can also find me at Monster of the Week Substack. So if you do that, that's my preference. I'm also at Wicked Tree Press on Instagram and Facebook. And I hang out at Twitter every once in a while, but that's not necessarily the best place to communicate with me. So
Awesome. And then what conventions are you going to be hitting up this year? I know we listed them earlier,
yeah.
but just to have them out.
I'm going to be at the Nebula conference for sci-fi people, but that's not like a convention. I'm going to go to the ALA, American Librarian Association, in San Diego at the end of June. I will be in the Artist Alley, booth 122, and then it'll be at San Diego Comic-Con in the end of July.
Cool.
And that's
awesome.
all I have confirmed for sure this year.
Nice.
I think that's not true. I'm going to go to LA Comic-Con in October as well.
Oh, cool. Definitely.
Yeah.
I got to get to the West Coast cons again. I miss them so much. San Diego's always a blast, and we had such a good time last year. I really hope we get to get a table again in the next year or two. If I could travel that. I'm seeing Neil Gaiman the same week as San Diego.
Funny.
So I had to make a decision. I was like, am I going to go see Neil Gaiman talk or go to San Diego? And I was like, I'm going to go see Neil.
Yeah, it's probably that's going to be worth it. Yeah. It's a hard choice.
It is. It was. Yeah, it was a hard choice.
Yeah.
But Jessica, thank you so much. This has been so much fun, so enlightening. And, everything you've said is probably not going to just reinforce listeners, what they do in their practices, but it really reinforced a lot of what I do myself. So thank you for that. And it lets me know that I'm probably on a good path, just judging by what you do and your success and everything. So really comforting. And there's so much here that is going to be enriching for all of our listeners and creators. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for what you're doing and creatively. I really admire it because Mary Shelley is such a brilliant book. I can't wait to actually dive in and really talk about it next time we talk about everything. Such a great time. But everyone, all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in for another great episode. Don't forget, we have so many cool things going on at CWS right now. And in fact, we're going to be launching a brand new website in the coming week. So keep an eye out for that. And then we'll have a really big announcement coming June for you guys to look forward to in July. So keep your eyes out on social media, keep your eyes out on our newsletter, subscribe to our newsletter. There's so much new information that's going on there. And I'm actually in charge of the newsletter now. So I'm dumping all this cool stuff, and including, we just announced Indie Creator Con is open for creators to set up to see if they could apply for a table. Check out those links. That link is also in the bio behind here. Also with all of Jessica's links from her Substack and everything else she does. So go check out all of it and follow it. I'm going to, because I want to read those Monster Weekly Substack articles. That's going to be great. But as always, thanks for hanging. Stay creative and stay inspired. Looking for high quality printing, fast turnaround, and the industry's best customer service? Look no further than Comix Wellspring. Trusted by thousands of indie comic creators, Comix Wellspring is proven to be the go-to comic book printer. So when you're ready to bring your comic books to life, go to comicswellspring.com and be sure to check out one of the best platforms to sell your physical and digital comics online, the CWS Bookstore. Remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell to see our lives come out twice every single week on YouTube and podcast platforms. And also tag us when you share your favorite episodes and moments from the show. And remember, creators, thanks for hanging, keep creating, and stay inspired.